So today's session, as I said, is on the SDGs and advocacy. And at this time, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to invite Brian to come on and to please welcome everyone and to introduce Sue.
Okay, thanks, Tino, and yes, welcome everyone to this, the third in our series of webinars. This one on the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. And as mentioned, today's presentation is being made by Sue Cochrane. Sue's an Ursuline sister from Australia who joined the ERI team and community here in Gayard in February of this year. Sue graduated as a physiotherapist in 1981 and has wide experience in that area. She's also committed to social justice and has coordinated the Asia Pacific Ursulines Justice, Peace and Integrity of Creation group. She has a graduate certificate in educational studies from the University of Queensland in Australia, a Master of Arts in Theology from the Australian Catholic University, and a Master of Development Studies from Sydney University. Sue's particularly interested in the rights of children who have a disability, especially in regard to their access to education and inclusion in their local communities. Her other areas of interest includes the rights of all people with disabilities, the rights of women and other marginalised groups, and care of the earth. So with that introduction, thanks, Sue, and over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Brian, and welcome everybody. I'm just going to share my screen and hopefully this will all work. Just bear with me. Share. Okay. Well, hopefully you can now see my PowerPoint.
Yes.
And as you know, our topic this afternoon is Sustainable Development Goals and how we can use those as part of our advocacy to improve our human rights. So I'm going to start with a little bit of an overview of how the goals came to be, what they're about, how we are measuring them, how we're going, and then how we can feed that into our advocacy work. I'm going to share a number of short videos. Also, we'll have some time to put questions and thoughts into the chat. And I'm going to show you a number of websites that are pertinent to the topic. So all of those will be on a handout, which Tino will email to you. So you don't have to worry about trying to take down where all the resources I'm showing you come from. Okay, so some of you will know a lot about the goals and have been working with them for years, and others this might be a fairly new topic for you. So there's 17 goals, as you can see. We'll be looking at them in more detail as we go, and within each of the goals there's a number of targets. So I'm just going to go where they came from first so that we get a little bit of a... So the background. So the first thing about them, they're a global initiative. There's something that has come from everybody. So it was increasingly recognised that human rights are essential to achieve sustainable development. They're the result of the most consultative and inclusive process in the history of the United Nations. So in September 2015, 170 world leaders gathered at the UN to adopt the 2030 Agenda, and they've been officially adopted by 193 countries. Now, there's a lot going wrong in our world today, and there's a lot we can be despairing about, but I think it's exciting that we managed to get 193 countries to agree on something, even though they may not be working towards them as well as we'd like, and there's lots of problems. At least they have acknowledged that there's something we want to work for, and it's something that our whole world needs to work for. It's not just one country. So, human rights. Grounded in international human rights law, the Agenda offers critical opportunities to advance the realisation of human rights for all people everywhere without discrimination. And I think that's a really important point. The goals won't be achieved until they're achieved for every person in every country. One country can't say, we've done everything to do with the goals, we're right. They're goals that are global goals that are important to everybody. The new agenda, as I said, it covers 17 sustainable development goals, 167 targets, and they're serving as the overall framework to guide global and national development for 15 years from 2016 till 2030. So, you know, we're up to 2025. We're getting towards the end of the time, and we've still got a long way to go. Just going to show you this short video, which just goes through each of the goals. The sound doesn't work when you listen to it. I'm just going to read out the goals. It's very short, but it just gives you a bit of an introduction to where the goals are, what the goals are. So, end poverty, reduce inequalities, tackle climate change, partnership for the goals, probably the most important goal, responsible consumption and production, decent work, good health, life below water, clean water and sanitation, climate action, life on land, peace, justice and strong institutions, affordable and clean energy, gender equality, quality education, zero hunger, industry innovation, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities, no poverty. So how are the SDGs different to what's happened before? The Sustainable Development Goals were born at a United Nations conference in Rio de Janeiro in 2012. So it took 3 years from when they started thinking about them and talking about them to actually develop the goals. So it was a slow process of all the countries getting together and talking about what might come next. So they replaced the Millennial Development Goals, which started a global effort in 2000 to tackle the indignity of poverty. So there are 5 key themes of the 2030 agenda, and these are all really important. So the important thing about the goals is they're all interconnected. You can't have one goal completed without the others. So the 5 Ps we talk about of the goals: people, so that's to end poverty and hunger in all forms and ensure dignity and equality. Prosperity, so that's to ensure prosperous and fulfilling lives in harmony with nature. Peace, a very important one in our world today. Foster peaceful, just and inclusive societies. Planet, protect our planet's natural resources and climate for future generations, because if we don't do that, we're not going to have future generations. And the most important one, really, for it all to happen, partnership. Implement the agenda through a solid global partnership. And we need all those for sustainable development. So how are they different to what was happening before, to the MDGs, to the Millennial Development Goals? Firstly, the universal. So the MDGs only apply to so-called developing countries. The SDGs apply to all countries. They're transformative. So this agenda, the 5 Ps, people, planet, prosperity, peace and partnership, it's a transformative vision for people. It's planet-centred, human rights-based, gender-sensitive, and focused on sustainable development that goes far beyond the MDGs. It's comprehensive. The MDGs focused on certain economic and social rights. The SDGs covers issues related to all human rights: economic, civil, cultural, political, social rights, and the right to development. It's inclusive, strives to leave no one behind. And that's become something you hear often at the United Nations, that the importance of leaving no one behind. Nothing's achieved until it's achieved for everybody. Envisaging a world of universal respect for equality and non-discrimination, between and within countries, including gender equality, reaffirming the responsibilities of all states to respect, protect, and promote human rights without distinction of any kind as to race, colour, sex, language, religion, political or other opinions, national and social origin, property, birth, disability, and other status. And as you can probably see from that, we've still got quite a way to go to achieve that goal. But this is a little video that goes for 5 or 6 minutes. It just gives you us a little bit more background to the Sustainable Development Goals and what they all are. So we'll just watch that.
What are the SDGs? In 2015, world leaders from 193 countries agreed the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, the world's new action plan for the next 15 years to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, fight inequality, tackle climate change and achieve sustainable development for all. The SDGs follow the Millennium Development Goals, or MDGs, agreed in 2000 in a global coordinated attempt to tackle development issues. As a result, the number of people living in extreme poverty has declined by more than half compared to 1990. More girls and boys go to primary school than ever before, and far more people have access to water and essential medicines. But progress of the MDGs has been mixed. Today, over 800 million people still live in extreme poverty. They are also most vulnerable to the increasing impacts from climate change and environmental degradation. Years of hard-won progress fighting poverty could easily be wiped out by even small conflicts, economic crises, or natural disasters. Also, Sub-Saharan Africa and Southern Asia consistently achieved less progress than other regions. The MDGs measured success on national averages, often missing what happened with marginalised groups like people with disabilities, indigenous groups, rural communities and women. The international community recognised the new challenges and that human prosperity must go hand in hand with protecting the planet. After a 3-year participatory process, world leaders finally adopted 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So what are these goals for? They are end poverty for all, freedom from hunger, health and well-being, quality of education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, sustainable energy for all, decent work and economic development, innovation and resilient infrastructure, reducing inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, sustainable consumption and production, action on climate change, healthy oceans, sustainable ecosystems, peace and justice, global partnerships. There are 4 underlying principles that come with the SDGs and that are transformational in the way we work on development in the future. Firstly, the SDGs are universal. They apply to every country, rich and poor, north and south, developed and developing. They recognise that global challenges like tackling climate change and changing models of development require global solutions. Domestic policies that look at these issues in one country will have an impact on other parts of the world, so we need to coordinate. Secondly, they integrate all dimensions of sustainability: economic development, social progress, and environmental protection. For example, they tell us to grow enough food for all without destroying the soil or overusing water, to develop our economies without increasing inequality, or to produce enough electricity for all without pumping more CO2 into the atmosphere. This is similar to what Pope Francis says in his encyclical. We are faced not with 2 separate crises, one environmental and the other social, but rather with one complex crisis, which is both social and environmental. Strategies for a solution demand an integrated approach to combating poverty, restoring dignity to the excluded, and at the same time protecting nature. The SDGs tell us we should leave no one behind. Governments have agreed no goal should be met unless it is met for everyone, including those in society most vulnerable and hardest to reach. So education must reach Indigenous communities, jobs created for women and men, quality healthcare available for all rural communities, and water and sanitation facilities accessible for people living with disabilities. Tackling exclusion is the key to tackling inequality. And finally, the SDGs require the participation of all. The process to agree the SDGs took years and included national dialogues, consultations with civil society groups, the private sector and academia, and ended with negotiations between all governments at the UN. There's a strong sense of ownership of these goals. The result is ambitious, but it reflects what the world wants. Today, the implementation of the SDGs requires ongoing participation at a national and local level. All stakeholders have a role towards their successful achievement. Taken together with the Paris Climate Change Agreement and the Pope's encyclical Laudato Si', the SDGs provide a new framework for approaching sustainable development.
We know that it's so difficult for some countries, particularly poorer countries, to have the funding to address the SDGs. Some of them are spending more money on servicing their goals and their debts than they have to spend on things in their country like education. So it's a huge problem, and that's one of the reasons why I'm saying that the goals won't be achieved till they're achieved for every country. But we're going to look at the mechanism that helps for countries, that measures the progress of countries and what opportunities there are for countries to speak about what the progress they've made. So this is the high-level political forum. So this is the main United Nations platform for sustainable development. It meets annually for 8 days in the UN in New York. It'll be meeting in July this year. And its main role is follow-up and review of the SDGs at the global level. So it looks at what's happening all over the world as far as the Sustainable Development Goals go, what the progress is, and then it looks at particular countries, have the opportunity to present what's happening there, and we'll talk a bit about that on the next slide. So the theme of this year is advancing sustainable, inclusive science and evidence-based solutions for the 2030 Agenda and its SDGs, for leaving no one behind. So again, it's that leaving no one behind that's such an important part of what we're trying to do. And as someone said, how we're leaving people behind because they don't have the money to work on these goals sometimes. So every time every year when the HLPF meets, they look in depth at 5 goals. So the goals for this year are 3, 5, 8, 14, and 17. And they are: 3 is healthy lives, 5 is gender equality, 8 is decent work and economic growth, 14 is life below water, and 17 is partnership for the goals. And every year, the 4 first goals change, but 17, partnership for the goals, is one of the goals that is reviewed in depth every single year. That's how important it is, because as we say, we don't have the partnership, the whole world working together to achieve the goals, then they're not going to happen. So all 193 states are encouraged to voluntarily present their national review of the progress made towards the realisation of the SDGs at the HLPF. So this is one of the ways where states can track the progress that they're making towards the SDGs. 37 countries are presenting a voluntary national review at the 2025 high-level political forum, and we'll have a look at what they are in a minute. So the voluntary national reviews. So we've talked in the other sessions about universal periodic reviews and the treaty body systems, and how other countries are reviewing countries for the UPR, experts are reviewing countries for the treaty bodies. But the voluntary national reviews are really, they're voluntary, they're state-led, and they're undertaken by both developed and developing countries. So what that means, as it says, voluntary, you don't have to present a national review. It's up to countries to decide when they want to put forward their progress to be looked at one of these meetings. It's led by the state, so the country who is putting in the review actually puts together what they want to present, and it's undertaken by both developed and developing countries. So every country, no country has achieved all the goals. The targets and the indicators from the Sustainable Development Goals form the basis for these reviews. They're taking place within the state, as well as the voluntary national reviews conducted by the High-Level Political Forum in New York. So NGOs, this is where we can come in. By using the same targets and indicators, NGOs can present their review reports on the realisation of the SDGs via state at side events at the HLPF, thus holding them accountable. And there's a number of ways we can work towards holding them accountable. And so we're just going to look first at a little bit more about the voluntary national reviews. So this is a link on the website that tells you about the High-Level Political Forum. You can find a lot of information about it. Voluntary national reviews. And here are the 37 countries who are presenting, who've said they want to present their national review at this year's meeting. So we can just click on one of these countries. So you might see a country that your country involved there. Some countries, it's their second time they've presented. Some, it's their fourth time they've presented. So it's up to countries to choose when they want to present. So this is South Africa. That's one of the countries that's presenting this year. And we can see that South Africa previously presented a national review in 2019. So this is the second time they've looked at it. So you can click on and look at what documents and reports have been provided by them and by different people, and their focal point partnerships and commitments, so who they've partnered with, what they've committed to do. So you can do that for your country, for each of the countries, to get a little bit more information about what's happening. If your country's not there, you can, not this year, you can look and see when it is going to present again, and also see what the outcome were of their last VNR. So I just want to go back to this because there's a handbook that you can download that countries can use to present, to prepare their voluntary national review. So that's something useful for you to know if you're interested to see what your country's doing. And often countries will collaborate with civil society as well in preparing their submissions. It's up to them how they do that. So I'm just going to, you also can put forward some information. I'm just going to go back to my PowerPoint. Here we go. And this is an organisation that has put together some information if you want to, for civil society, provide guidance and non-government stakeholders how to engage in the voluntary national review process. So this is a little booklet that's been put out a few years ago, but it's still got some very good information about engaging in national implementation and review of the agenda. So it's how you can help encourage your country to implement the things that they've signed up for and review how they're going on it. So you can request for your government to conduct a review. You can find out about how you can get engaged, plan engagement with other organisations in your area, participate in national consultations, review the report, engage in the HLPF, and follow up global discussions. So there's a lot of information about ways you can be involved if that's something you or your organisation are interested in participating in. And you might see that your country's coming up for an HLPF maybe next year or the year after too, and you want to start getting some information together for that. So the other thing that's happened last year was the Pact for the Future. So you may have heard about this. This was a meeting in September 2024. The pact, this document that's come out of this, and I've put a link for that into your resources as well. It's a culmination of an inclusive years-long process to adapt international cooperation to the realities of today and the challenges of tomorrow. And it was designed to turbocharge implementation of Sustainable Development Goals. So understanding that we've only got a few years left, and obviously it will have to be reviewed and what comes next after 2030. 2030 won't be the end of the process. Suddenly everything's done. It'll be looking, this is where we've got, where do we want to go next, as they did with the MDGs. Okay, we've done this, it's had this much progress, but how do we carry that forward so that everyone can be included? So this is a link to the website of the Summit of the Future. You can see it met last year between the 20th and the 23rd of September, actually, and the outcome document here, which world leaders adopted, that covers a broad range of themes, including peace and security, sustainable development. So it was another way to try and move along the sustainable development goals. So how are we going with the goals? This is just a short video. Every year, a Sustainable Development Goals report is put out by the United Nations. Now, this is the one from last year because it usually comes out about around the middle of the year. So we'll just watch this short video and see a little bit of information about how things are going.
The Sustainable Development Goals Report 2024. A moment of choice and consequence. With just 6 years remaining, current progress falls far short of what is required to meet the SDGs. The report reveals that only 17% of the SDG targets are on track, with nearly half showing minimal or moderate progress, and over 1/3 stalled or regressing. The convergence of multiple global crises has severely hindered progress. The lingering impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, escalating conflicts, geopolitical tensions, and growing climate chaos have severely hindered progress. We must expand on successes to drive accelerated action. We're seeing significant progress in reducing child mortality, HIV prevention, and access to water, sanitation, and energy. We are at a critical moment of choice and consequence. We need bold action for peace, resolving conflicts through dialogue and diplomacy, financial support, reforming the global financial system to support developing countries, implementation surge, investing in critical areas like food, energy, social protection, digital connectivity, and more. We must empower women and girls in all our efforts. This year's Summit of the Future and upcoming conferences in 2025 are our chance to accelerate progress. We must act now and act boldly to rescue the SDGs. The choices we make today will shape our collective future. United, we can overcome any challenge and realize the world we want.
Have you managed?
Someone's not on mute. Okay. We're just going to look at some more information about the SDG. So this is the website for the Sustainable Development Report, and I've taken you to the country profiles in this one, so we can actually look at how different countries are going. So you can click on your country, and you can see where they're coming in the index rank. So this is Argentina, so 47 out of 166 so far. Their index score And then these is just a little way to see how they're going towards each goal. So we can see for Argentina that their quality education is green. So they're making some reasonable progress on that, moderately improving, insufficient to attain the goal. So if you look at every country, they're going to be mostly, similar sort of things to this, So the green means they're making, they're doing quite well. If it's green arrow going up, they're making good progress. So even though clean water and sanitation here is not great still, but they're making really good, Argentina's making really good progress towards that goal. So it gives you two things. One, where they're going on trying to achieve the goal, and the other is whether they're actually improving or not. So these are the indicators that I was talking about before. So we should just go on no poverty. So the indicators of poverty, head count ratio at $2.15 a day and head count ratio at 365 a day. So that means they're making good progress on people not living in poverty below $2.15 a day, which is the current poverty level for the world. So you can click on each of those and get a little bit more. These are all the indicators that we talked about within each goal. Each of the 17 goals, there's a number of indicators. So in here, you can see how countries are going on at each of their indicators. So you can see that prevalence of undernourishment is good, but the prevalence of obesity, there's a lot of obesity. So you can be doing really well on one part of a goal, but the indicator can show that you've still got a lot of work to do on another part of the goal. So that's something you can go on, look at your country, see where they're at, see where the progress is coming from, and see where they've still got things to do and how that might help. So this is looking at the goals again from a human rights perspective. So we can select one of the goals here. We're going to select gender equality. Okay, and again, you can see what all the different subtopics are under the targets underneath the goals. And you can then select by country. So we'll just look at Australia because it's near the top of the thing. And then you can search by mechanism. So this is how many times this goal's come up at either a UPR or at one of the treaty bodies, and as it results maybe to children. And so then you can choose all of those, and it'll tell you how often this has been brought up as an issue at either the UPR, so a treaty body. So gender equality in Australia is still a significant problem that's been brought up at in treaty bodies, and also in the Universal Periodic Review, not so much in special procedures. So again, you can look at your country, you can look at a goal that you're particularly interested in, and see how often that's come up as something that's been mentioned. Then you can go and look at the UPR recommendations, and maybe that can be a way also to help move your country forward in that area. So this is one of the main UN websites for the Sustainable Development Goals. It talks about the 17 goals, 169 targets. And these are the events and publications, what's actually been happening. So you can see 8,018 actions, 1,357 publications. So again, we're going to pick partnership for the goals, just to have a look. And it'll give you related topics. And as you can see, because the goals are intersect, you just don't look at education without looking at poverty, because if people can't afford to get to school, then they're not going to get educated. If they're hungry, they're not going to learn well. If they don't have good sanitation, girls might not be able to go to school. So you can see that each goal is interconnected. So this just gives you some related topics that you can explore. It also, for each goal, it gives you a nice infographic if you're trying to, have a theme look at a goal a month or whatever you want to do in your schools or wherever you're working, and gives you just some information in a nice clear form that you can print out about that particular goal to give you some more information about it. Okay, so you can again look at any goals that you're interested in there. And this one is, again, there's lots of resources. So have a look. This is SDG Explainer, so it gives you a little thing about what is sustainable development, what is plastic pollution, marine diversity, but these fast facts are very good too, I think. So if you wanted to say maybe something you're not so sure about, like what does it mean? You know, what are they looking at with affordable and clean energy? So we can open this. It's just a little 2-page double-sided PDF. What is Goal 7? You know, it tells you what it's about. Why should I care about the goal? What can we do to fix these issues? You know, what countries can do to accelerate the transition, what businesses can do, what you can do. So it's giving that, you know, practical things that can be done at the international, national, business and local level, what you can do yourself to help support each goal. And this is just a little, because, you know, a number of us are educators, it's just a little video on education.
In 2022, the United Nations Transforming Education Summit was convened in response to a global crisis in education and as a...
Oops, sorry.
In 2022, the United Nations Transforming Education Summit was convened in response to a global crisis in education and as a solution to the challenges the world is facing. With the 2030 deadline approaching, the world remains seriously off track to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal 4 to ensure inclusive, equitable, quality education and to promote lifelong learning opportunities for a better future. The summit called for rethinking the purpose, content and delivery of education and galvanized political commitment at the highest level, resulting in 144 national statements of commitment to transforming education systems. The SDG 4 High-Level Steering Committee called on UNESCO to develop the dashboard of country commitments and actions to transform education to monitor the implementation of these country commitments. The dashboard reveals that almost all countries committed to and undertook actions toward inclusion, equity, and gender equality. Digital learning and curricular content are also areas of action that nearly all countries have been working on to transform education. While thematic areas such as early childhood care and education and youth engagement were not high on most countries' commitment list, 92% and 76% of countries respectively reported action. To tackle the global teacher shortage, estimated at 44 million, and ensure that teachers are well prepared and supported, 9 out of 10 countries are transforming teacher training and professional development, while 7 out of 10 countries reported country actions to improve teachers' working conditions and professional autonomy. UNESCO also produced an analytical report of and recommendations from the dashboard data, including country examples and good practices of transformative actions in education. Together, we must reimagine education systems to create a more just, sustainable, resilient, and peaceful future.
It will reach the page. Just this is the, yeah. So this is the website that's involved with particularly for SDG 4, for those of you who are particularly interested in education. There's a knowledge hub there. There's a dashboard. This is what they were talking about in the video. So there's a one-stop shop for education-related good practice. This is a country dashboard, and again, you can choose a country and you can just, okay, so we've just come on, South Africa tells you. But you can actually do comparisons between countries. You can look at the total number of survey responses. There's a whole lot of different stuff, things to explore there by, you can look at a particular action, took action. This is on inclusion, equity, and gender equality. So we look at Latin America and the Caribbean, and that'll just show us the countries who actually took action on that particular area. So Brazil and Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, And then you can go to country overviews, country profiles. So we won't look at all that now, but again, you can go in, find your country and find out what they've been doing as far as education goes. So it's a good resource if that's something that you're interested in. So, okay. So, sorry, Argentina, you're near the beginning of the alphabet. Okay. Key documents, so it's got a national statement of commitment. It tells you committed, where it committed and took action, where it didn't commit but took action. And as that video said, a lot of the countries, they didn't make commitments around high school education and early childhood education, but a lot of them took action in any case. So it just tells you a little bit more about content and methods, what they've done. So it's a good one to explore as well if education is your particular focus. Okay, so again.
In 2020.
Okay, so SDGs, 17, partnership for the goals. That's the one that's we really do have to remember, because without that, us all working together, we're not going to achieve the goals. So before we move on to the next section, we'll just have open up the little bit of time for questions, what you're thinking about that. The SDGs are a voluntary process. So how countries are addressing their SDGs is also brought up in the Universal Periodic Review process, and but it is voluntary. So there isn't sanction against countries if they haven't fulfilled their SDGs. But most countries, it's interesting, when you listen to them, they want to be seen to be doing the right thing. So even if they're not, you know, they're 193 countries said that they think these are a good idea. So I think, you know, this is one of the things, how do we go back to our countries and help them to see how they're not meeting the goals, what they can be doing, encourage them maybe to go to a voluntary national review so that they can have the benefit of other countries, other people looking at them and advising them on how to keep things going. Certainly there's much that needs to be done still to achieve the SDGs. We're a long way from that. So the next section we're going to look at is actually about like some advocacy, some tools around that. I mean, we've already talked about some things you can do, but a little bit more information, some things that you can do at just even at your own level if you can't do them at a national level. Yes, and implementing the goals is of course a major problem. And you know, the COVID-19 virus and you know, the world situation with so much conflict in our world today makes things very difficult. And then, you know, different countries, you've got corruption, you've got people wanting to move away from not really caring about each other. I think that's one of the things. One of the things about the United Nations, when you listen to what they say, they're wanting to say no one left behind, which is a wonderful goal, but how do we get every country to really live that? That's the thing. Yes, so this is hopefully we're going to look now at the way forward and what can happen. Now, often we feel like we can't do much on our little individual areas, but it's like that every little bit we do makes a difference. You know, telling someone else about the Sustainable Development Goals. I don't know about you, but it's not something that was talked about in our country at all. And I know other countries are really grabbing it and working towards it and have got very clear goals towards that. So I think there are ways that we can build awareness. That's a start, looking maybe within our schools, within our neighbourhoods. What can we do to help work towards the goals, even if our government's not doing as much as we'd like? You know, we can't get the big picture. What can we do in the small picture as well? You know, instead of just, we can't do anything, or, you know, they're not doing anything. So, and it can get very depressing, I think, when you feel like you're doing everything and no one else is really listening. So I'm going to resume sharing now. Is it? And
yes.
Otherwise I'll keep talking. Okay, so this is where we're at now. Less than 1/5 of the targets are on track. The world's failing to deliver. and some goals are regressing or stagnating. So yes, we've certainly got a long way to go still. So where do we go from here? These are some websites to help you look at the global goals, what we can do, how we can work in different areas. So this website has a goal of the month, fight for gender equality. And then it's got a really nice, what can you do to take action? There's a section for schools, a section for business, some news items about what is happening. We know what it's meant to people for aid to be cut, and lots of developed countries have decreased the amount of aid they're providing, which is leaving a lot of people in dire straits, in famine. But what can you do? Take action. And you can find a goal. So for each goal, you can pick a goal. Decent work and economic growth. What can I do? Okay, you can find a charity if that's something. Be a conscious consumer. Read about workers in other countries. Stay informed. Organise a mentoring program. Know your rights. Buy from local producers. So for each goal, there's some really simple things that you can start thinking about. What can I do for that goal that you can have a look at on that website? The world's largest lesson is an educational website. It's been set up in partnership with UNICEF and UNESCO, and teaching goals for children. So I think, if we can really work on our children being informed about what we need for a just world and what they can do, we're hopefully bringing up a generation of people who are going to be more, I think a lot of our young people, and I'm sure there's probably some young people on here too, in some ways have got a much more thirst still. Maybe they're not as disheartened as much yet, but they really do have that thirst for how can we live better, what can we do for our world, how can we protect the world. So this gives you some resources for teaching about the goals. Act Now, this is a United Nations website that I think it's got an area for children, what you can do, facts and figures, what we can do, 25 million actions taken around the world. So again, it helps you to see the things are happening in the world, because it can be very depressing, how you can speak up. Now, it's not safe in every country to speak up. How can we work for a just society, a peaceful world? Track your change. So this is a little, an app you can download, a world in support of Act Now, where you can actually track what's happening, track what you're able to do if you're into apps and things, or sometimes maybe your students might be. It's just another way to get people engaged. So not all these are going to suit everybody, but there's enough different variety of things here that we can do. We can find something that speaks to our level. So this is the Action for Sustainable Development. It's a website that it's a civil society group, and what interested me about. So if you're looking to make changes in your country, they support civil society groups in every region of the world to influence policy decisions and sustainable development. So that's it's a matter of connecting with other people who've got the same interests, and so you can work together and collaboratively to try and contribute. So they've got tools and reports, and I thought one of the tools they had that was useful was this scorecard toolkit. If your country is doing a VNR, a toolkit for a people's scorecard. So an independent civil society assessment of national delivery of the 2030 agenda. So if you want to, if you're at this level, you can go through and see what is our country doing. It steps you through forming a coalition, what you can do at different levels. So it's a really good little resource if you really want to get into things at a greater depth. And then what can we do? But this is just on the very basic level. If we want to do something else, what can we do? Where do we go after we've listened to these talks, after we've got them? We want to make changes. So, maybe we can have a group. If there's a few of you who've come from the same school or the same organisation, you might want to get together, You might want to invite, you might be the only one, but there's other people at your school who would like to have been involved, or in your work or in your neighbourhood. And you could have a meeting together. You can use the videos that have been recorded of today or of the other sessions, watch part of it, watch all of it. When you try and teach someone else what you've learned, it helps to embed that learning in you. So you could go through and use that as a starting place. Where do we want to go? Use the shared resources to explore more about the Sustainable Development Goals. What are some manageable activities? So in your school, it might be, you might want to do, we're just going to make sure we pick up the rubbish off the floor and off the ground. I'm sure a lot of you are doing that kind of thing. Or we're going to turn the lights off in the classroom and we don't need them. Just those really that you can track, how are we doing with that? How are we managing our waste? How are we what are we doing for our children who are coming to school hungry? Is there a breakfast? Is there a hot lunch? Is there something we can do about that? Can we get people together to provide that? How are our teachers being paid? What can we do to make sure our teachers are paid and well trained so that they can educate our children? So we can do that on a very basic level, or we can go right up to filling out those templates to advocate at that country and national level. And everyone's going to be somewhere different, what you think you can do, within your work life, within your home life, within what moves you. So what goals are most important to you? Do you know? Is it clean energy? Is it education? Is it poverty? No hunger? All the goals are important, but you can't, and they're all interrelated, but which ones really call you and draw you? And this little quiz has got a little, there's a little quiz on this Global Goals website, and you can take the quiz and you just swipe right or left. It'll give you two options of question. You swipe right or left, and at the end it tells you, okay, these are the goals that it seems like you're the most interested in. So maybe that'll just give you somewhere to start, rather than going through all of these, and then if you get those, then you might come back to this and then click on, oh, okay, it looks like I'm really interested in gender equality. So, we can learn something more about that. How do we do that? What can we do in our country to improve gender equality? And this is a little video just to give us something that's a little bit of hope, what's happening coming into the future.
The countdown to 2025 is behind us, but the clock to 2030 continues ticking. UNDESA is accelerating efforts to bring the world together, to build capacity and provide knowledge and data to help reach the goals of the 2030 Agenda. Here are the milestones ahead. Oceans are the Earth's lifeblood, with rich biodiversity providing nutrition and livelihoods. Climate change, pollution, and unsustainable use of resources are endangering progress towards the sustainable world. The third UN Ocean Conference will look for ways to reverse these damaging trends and conserve and protect ocean resources. To reach the ambitious targets of our 2030 Agenda, we need to put money where it matters. The Fourth International Conference on Financing for Development will drive reforms of the global financial architecture to address today's challenges, secure SDG financing, and tackle emerging issues. The Second World Summit for Social Development is a pivotal moment to demonstrate commitment to social development. In the 3 decades since the first Social Summit, our global family has grown to over 8 billion. So have the challenges we face, from climate change to convergent crises. The summit will stress a people-centered approach that emphasizes inclusion, equity, and social justice. The year 2025 is also a year of celebration. The United Nations turns 80. For 8 decades, the UN has been at the heart of global cooperation, working together for a better, more sustainable world. These milestones remind us progress is achievable when we work together. Stay informed, be a part of the process. Check out UNDESA Voice and the UNDESA website.
So the Sustainable Development Goals, they're a great goal. As we said at the beginning, they're aspirational. We've got a long way to go before we meet them. We know that a very small percentage of the world's population, I think like the 10 richest people, have something like 80% of the world's wealth. We know there's enough food produced in the world. We know there's enough money so that everyone can have enough. The problem is that so much of the wealth and so much of the power is in the hands of people who probably aren't so interested in global goals for sustainable development. So it's easy to get despairing. I think there's nothing we can do, but when it's good to look at the websites, to look at what is happening, what actions are happening, maybe what your country has achieved, as well as then what they haven't achieved, and how can we build on that. Each country is trying to work towards the goals. There's only 3 countries who haven't presented at a voluntary national review since the SDGs began. And they are Haiti and Myanmar, which we understand are in, terrible situations at this stage with conflict and problems with governance and everything. And the other one is the United States, who tends to do things a little bit differently to other countries. So even though we might look at our country and think they're not really doing that, they are showing an interest. So how can we help to build on that interest? How can we inform our local communities? How can we inform our schools? How can we work together to try and work towards these goals? And to know that rich countries, developed countries like Australia, like, so many of our countries have been the cause of climate change, been the cause of lots of the things that cause poorer countries to be struggling, who have left countries in crippling debt so that they have trouble to work towards these goals. So we need to encourage our wealthy countries too to pick up on their commitments and to not be spending so much money on armaments, but to be spending it on investing in peace and investing on good livelihoods, good education, and all those other things that will give us a good life, so that we leave no one behind. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
I'll just go down a little.
So the countries who are doing best on their, sustainable development goals, we can have a look. They're countries like the Scandinavian countries, that are small countries, well-off countries. They're doing the best. I think whether they've improved the most, I think that's another thing we need to look at, is where countries have started from. So it's not like, we're best and we're worst. It's like where you've started from and where you've gone to, where you're going, who's making progress on the goals, I think is probably a better question. And then we can learn from countries who have been making good progress about what have they done to help make that. So I know there's some countries in Africa who are very committed to working on the Sustainable Development Goals and incorporated in, and some of our schools incorporate teaching about the Sustainable Development Goals into their education programs. So it's embedded in the curriculum. And I think that's something also we can look at, that maybe looking at which country's doing the best is probably not going to give us a helpful answer, because we don't all have the same resources to deal with it, but significant outcomes. I think would someone like to say whether they think their country's made significant strides with addressing the SDGs? Is there anyone who thinks, who's been involved with processes that have seen work towards that, or have had that come up in their communities, or anyone from their governments or civil society ask them what we can be doing to work towards the SDGs? I know at the last United Nations, you know, the Human Rights Council just been meeting, and a number of countries spoke when they got up to speak. They addressed what they were trying to do for their towards the Sustainable Development Goals, and there was something that was really important to them, but other countries, they weren't mentioned. So I know there's a big variety.
Yeah, thanks. So, Brian, would you like to maybe respond to some of those questions over there, or some that you saw? You can unmute yourself, Brian.
I'll probably just respond in general. I think all countries have a responsibility to work towards the implementation, but countries have got different capacities. And, you know, the goal there talks about global partnership, and aid from developed countries is very important, which, you know, underlines the tragedy of the recent decision of the Trump administration, you know, cancelling US aid and all of that sort of thing. There was a reference to debt there, and in our ERI March newsletter, there was an article about the Jubilee Year campaign that was promoted by the Vatican to cancel the debt of countries, and we also saw that there's a conference scheduled later this year to address reforming the world's financial structure. So that's perhaps one way that hopefully can be addressed. And related to aid, I mean, the tragedy of the war in Ukraine, or another aspect of it, is the diversion of funds to military purposes, you know, that could otherwise be spent in working towards the goals, and that applies to conflicts that are taking place everywhere. And again, just to reiterate, it's come up, the comment has sort of come up a couple of times in the previous webinars. The UN doesn't have the power to compel countries to do anything. It depends on the goodwill of the countries. And there are certain UPR mechanisms that were mentioned. We've talked about the UPR, etc. And then, as Sue spent a lot of time talking about, there's the role of advocacy. So we all can do something to hold our government to account. It's not possible in countries that limit freedom of speech or dictatorships, but raising awareness, and there were lots of very useful links that Sue shared. There was a question there about how do we address poverty. Well, I think Goal 10 about reducing inequality is specifically about that. And I think, you know, there's a great amount of information that's available on those websites that Sue shared, and the data is available there, and reporting on progress and implementation. And it highlights that every country faces challenges, and I think that's important to keep in mind. So I guess they're just a few responses to the comments and questions that I saw.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much, Brian. Yes, now anyone who'd like to join in the conversation is welcome to do so. Okay, you can raise your hand. That would be helpful, so we know. So then after that, I'll invite you to unmute yourself. I see Teresa Blumenstein is present with us. She is the director of JCOR in New York. That's the Justice Coalition for Religious. Thank you for joining us, Teresa. Can I invite you, Teresa, to join us, to put on your camera and your mic, and to maybe share with us. You put down a link over there in the chat about all the different trainings that you have around the HLPF. So could you say a few words about that? Thank you.
Hi, Brother Tino. Thank you very much for the invitation. Is everyone able to hear me all right?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So the link that I shared in the chat box, and I will be happy to share it again because I think at this point it's quite far up in the chat. But I wanted to mention that when we were speaking about the HLPF, which is that annual forum for review of progress toward the SDGs, that we are offering a program. The Justice Coalition of Religious, of which Christian Brothers are a member through Edmund Rice International, as are several others who are on this call today. And so it's a group of many congregations who are collaborating to conduct advocacy through the UN system. And we are offering a training program which began in January, but we have recorded all of our programs since then, and it will continue through August. And that program is for the preparation of sisters, brothers, priests, as well as their partners who are interested in following the proceedings of the HLPF. It's especially a useful program for those who come from countries that will be reporting this year from that list of 37 that was mentioned earlier. It's especially useful for them because we do kind of get into the practical elements of reviewing the reports that will be submitted, those voluntary national reviews that will be submitted and presented by those 37 governments. And so if anyone is either living in one of those countries now, or if you are from there, or you spent some significant time there and have some personal experience that you could use to reflect on the situation in those countries, this program is open to you. It's free and it's online, and I will again share the link where you can get all the details about it. But we're very interested in helping to facilitate the engagement of anyone from this community who may be interested in learning more about how to have your perspective and your insights integrated into the small little window for opportunity that civil society has during the forum to share insights and to, as we say, contribute more truth into the narrative than we may be likely to hear from the presentations of government alone.
Thanks, Teresa. Teresa, you've been following the HLPF now since it started over there over all these years. What changes have you seen? What impact have you seen? Or how has the HLPF really helped to states even to take things forward or to hold them accountable?
I think, well, as you mentioned, it is a bit of a shortcoming that because the SDGs themselves were, they were adopted and they were a commitment that was made by all countries, but the reporting is voluntary. And there are 2 countries who have understandably not reported and one that has not understandably not reported, that being the United States. And it is, I think it's a sign of hope, though, that it's only those 3. It I think is evidence that the diplomatic process, the multilateral process that exists within the UN system does carry weight in the world, so that, there are forms of accountability other than, say, military enforcement or even legal enforcement of the commitments that are made through the UN. And we see the very fact that all but 3 nations have chosen, not been forced, but chosen to be part of the conversation over the years. And at this point, I think quite a few of them have presented even 3 times. And again, all on a voluntary basis. And so we can take that as, first of all, a sign that there is some kind of, some power to the soft pressure, the non-force pressure that exists in diplomacy and the multilateral system. And then I think the other sign of hope is that civil society itself has become more organized in the way that we are able to take advantage of the opportunities to participate in the forum. Granted, they are much smaller opportunities than we would like, but I think there may be space as we now find ourselves honestly approaching 2030. We're now in the last years of this agenda, and we can anticipate that there will be another agenda to follow it. And I think our having been engaged throughout this period will help us to formulate strong input into what both the next agenda will look like and also what the accountability mechanism will look like. And so, but in the meantime, civil society has worked hard to organize itself, which is pretty remarkable considering how much has had to occur basically on a voluntary basis. People of goodwill from all kinds of entities, many of them faith-based, but many secular, coming together to make use of a few common channels for input and to organize themselves by country and to put forward real legitimate critiques to governments on the floor of the UN, which, you know, you'll always hear a contrast between the presentation that's made by the government and the follow-up questions and statement that you hear from civil society. And to have those alternate voices in the room and to hear the contrast between those two presentations means that, you know, in a sense that truth does get to win at the end of the day, that that civil society is not silenced or drowned out, and that we're able to point out the shortcomings and to continue to put pressure on government in a space where their peers are listening. And I think that matters to governments at the end of the day, and that pressure, though we can only have small opportunities and we have to prepare a long time for it, those opportunities remain meaningful. And so it remains important that we are present and participating.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Teresa, for your insights and your comments. And anyone else who'd like to join the conversation, you're most welcome. Thanks, Teresa.
I would like to say something, brother. You know,
Yeah, you're most
so
welcome.
yeah,
Melba.
Melba, Sister Melba. Just I would like to encourage all of you, if it's possible, to participate in the high-level political forum online delegation. Do it, because that is a very amazing experience. And exactly for the developing countries, we could really have a critical review about what is missing, what you could add, what you could ask after the report to the country who this year, particularly, I am from Honduras, this year is El Salvador and Guatemala, and are very interesting. I am very, how do you say, curious about the report. And that is my participation. And thank you, Sister Sue. Your was beautiful, your presentation. Thank you very much.
Sister Melba, thank you very much. Anyone else who'd like to?
Yes, Brother Tino.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, for me, I think this session is very important, especially I am from the Caribbean in the context of the living in the Caribbean and Haiti. So in the Caribbean, we have some structures that have been established, like the CARICOM organization, which is the Caribbean Community Market, and we have the OECS, Organization of Eastern States in the Caribbean, that promotes development and, for better integration and more inclusive participation of people within the Caribbean. And we know that the Caribbean is a region that is very diverse in terms of culture and ethnicity. But I think, by unifying, bring unity among the people is very important because within the Caribbean, there are countries that are richer than the other, that have more resources than the other. So I think if this organization, could approach the problems in a different way to bring countries together and to identify, their weaknesses where, they can develop. If it is in terms of education, social work, human development, empowerment of youth. So that would have been very important. And I think, bringing countries together is very important. And in the Caribbean as well, because of our historical situation. So we were, because of slavery. So we were not able to develop our natural resources, even human resources in the Caribbean. And up to now, we are suffering from that. And we have an example of Haiti that's still struggling to move forward as the first Black independent country in the world. And so I think this approach would have been very important, to bring countries together and to identify the needs of those countries.
Thank you. Thank you, Vidmir. Okay, Vidmir is a presentation brother. Correct, Vidmir?
Yes.
And you're based at the moment in St. Lucia?
St. Lucia, yes.
Okay, thank you for joining us. Thank you.
You're
And the UN really is a unique platform, a global platform where things like what you've been speaking about, Vidmir, okay, countries supporting one another, offering technical help, offering it does take place over there. And the HLPF or the UN human rights mechanisms like the treaty bodies and the UPR and the special procedures are also meant to be to support countries. So thank you. Anyone else? One last one maybe we can take before I go back to Stu. Or Stu, would you like to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, good afternoon, David.
Good evening. Is that Emerin?
Yes, Imran from Cameroon.
Okay,
Working in
Imran.
the West region where there's war since more than nine years. We are in war here in this period, this zone. So I'm very appreciative about what I'm learning here since the first session I joined last year. For me, again, it's a privilege to be here today. I would like to ask, why not look away for this forum to be like an NGO, like Amnesty International and other NGO, who can compare the government to follow certain process, because we are here, we are learning things that are very practical, very interesting to help people. But it's still, at the face of learning, there's nothing that can help us to learn practicals.
Sorry about that. Carry
Hello?
on, carry on. Yeah, carry on, Emerin.
Yeah, so there's nothing, that can help us to put this rich knowledge we are getting from you people in practical that can really change people's lives. Because as I say, I've been working in a place where for 9 years we're in war, serious war with many kind of abuses, But all what we know, how can we put it into practice to stop even the abuses during the war? We have nothing concrete. That's why I'm thinking that why not try to make this NGO, this thing to be more like an official known NGO that can even have, like Amnesty International, like other NGO They can even compare government at time, to do one or two things. Because where I am here, for example, Red Cross
Right.
has helped.
Thanks, Emerin. I get the flow of your question over there and things. Okay. Yes, we are a faith-based NGO. We are a very small team over here in Geneva, three of us, and we have Kevin Cawley in New York. Okay, but we are not the only faith-based NGO. You just heard Teresa from the Justice Coalition of Religious that brings all these religious NGOs together. Okay, but I'm going to hand over right now to Sue, actually. Sue, we were talking about, remember the last time, about the follow-up. What could Emerin do with these videos that we have, okay, which are on these sessions? How could he use that to create further awareness and advocacy?
Thanks, Tino. So I think, as for anyone who wants to work, it's a matter of starting, I think, with a small group of people, but also to connect with other NGOs that are already working in your country if you can, and share the information and just see how you can advocate in small ways. And contact places like Amnesty International and use some of those resources to write up about some more about what's happening in your country. And then, with a group of you together, maybe a coalition of a few of the civil society groups that are there. But then you can go to Amnesty International or human rights, one of the human rights organizations, the international ones, or you say you're involved with Red Cross, and they're all working towards that. But, it's so hard to stop wars, isn't it? Because we need dialogue to stop a war. So, for you to advocate and maybe try and make changes where you are, and it's very difficult. I say there's no easy answers when you're living in a war zone, in a war zone. But I think if you can get a few people with same interest together, build up your coalition so you're supporting each other, and then look outwards to United Nations mechanisms and make reports even to the appropriate treaty bodies, that will come back to the government maybe and do some more investigation into what's happening in Cameroon. We don't hear anything much about the war in Cameroon because there's so many severe conflicts all over the world. It just, it falls out of the orbit of a lot of people. So even bringing it forward and making it more known might be something that's helpful. There's no easy answers, otherwise we wouldn't be living in conflict, but at least it means that you're doing something, trying to make some small steps to make a change,
Thank you. Sue. Thank you, Emerin.
Thank you.
Sue, over to you. Any last words?
I'd just like to thank you all for your attention and your attendance, and to keep, we can get overwhelmed with all the things that are not happening in our world. So if we can find something that is happening and build on that, maybe see what our government is doing or what our local community is doing, and how can we bring that forward so that we're trying to work towards the goals on all those different levels. And, as you say, if you can interact at the HLPF level, or when your country's coming up for a UPR or any of the other mechanisms, how can we be involved in our schools, in our communities, bring like-minded people together so that you can encourage each other, because it's very easy to feel like you're on your own when you're doing advocacy work, So thank you very much, and we'll send all those resources. I just wanted to say that someone asked a question about how do we make schools more inclusive. I could talk to you forever about that. We need to start with looking at how, but it's not something that's just easy to do. So maybe I'll write some answers for you about that particular question, because it's a huge topic, not something that we can just address now. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Sue, very much for the presentation today. And just before we leave, okay, I just want to share my screen once again with you. Okay. Just to remind you that our final session will not be next Tuesday, but it will be the following Tuesday on the 29th of April. And the final session will be focusing on the care of the earth in the light of Laudato Si, as well as the SDGs. And Kevin Cawley, the fourth member of our team based in New York, will be conducting that session.